Most food in UK supermarkets looks real. It looks fresh, natural, even high quality. But once you actually start checking what's inside, things get a bit different. After going through dozens of everyday products, from ready meals to snacks and basic staples, I tried to figure out which foods are actually real and which ones just look like they are. And what surprised me is how rare genuinely simple food has become. A lot of products that seem completely normal are filled with additives, stabilizers, and flavor adjustments designed to make them last longer and taste consistent. But a few stood out, not because they were perfect, but because they were noticeably closer to real food than everything around them. And once you start seeing that difference, it's hard to ignore. Let's start with one of the most common categories: ready meals. They're convenient, quick, and everywhere, but they're also one of the most processed types of food in the supermarket. If you check the ingredient lists, they're often long and complicated, filled with things you wouldn't normally use at home. That doesn't automatically make them bad, but it usually means the product has been heavily engineered. The texture is controlled, the flavor is adjusted, and everything is designed to behave the same way every time. And while that makes them reliable, it often makes them feel a bit flat. However, there are exceptions. Some ready meals keep things simpler. You'll see recognizable ingredients, fewer additives, and more straightforward recipes. And even though the difference isn't dramatic, it's enough to make the food feel more natural when you actually eat it. Now look at something even more common: sandwiches. Pre-packaged sandwiches are a staple in the UK. They're part of meal deals, quick lunches, and everyday routines. But they're also designed for shelf life, not freshness. The bread is treated to stay soft longer, the fillings are stabilized, and the sauces are adjusted so they don't separate or change texture over time. So while they look fresh, they're not quite the same as something made on the spot. That said, some options still stand out. Simpler combinations, fewer layers, less heavy sauce. When a sandwich focuses on just a few ingredients instead of trying to maximize flavor artificially, it tends to feel more real, less engineered, more natural. Dairy is where the contrast becomes even clearer. On one side, you have heavily processed options: cheese slices, flavored yogurts with long ingredient lists, added thickeners and flavorings. On the other side, you have much simpler products: basic yogurt made with just milk and cultures, cheese with minimal ingredients. These products don't try to control every detail of texture and flavor. They're slightly less uniform, sometimes less smooth, but they feel more natural, and once you compare them, the difference is obvious. Breakfast foods are another area where this gap shows up. Cereals often look simple and healthy on the surface, but many of them are highly processed. Added sugars, flavor systems, texture modifiers, they're designed to be appealing and consistent. But there are simpler options. Cereals with fewer ingredients, less processing, and more focus on the base grain. They might not stand out as much on the shelf, but they feel more grounded and less artificial when you eat them. And then there are snacks. This is probably the hardest category to navigate because processing is almost expected. Crisps, bars, packaged treats, they're built for convenience and taste. But even here, you can spot patterns. The more a product tries to imitate something else, the more processed it usually is. The simpler it stays, the closer it gets to something real. And while none of these are perfect, some are clearly less engineered than others. At this point, a pattern starts to appear. The foods that feel more real tend to have shorter ingredient lists, simpler structures, and fewer adjustments to texture and flavor. They don't try to be perfect, they don't try to last forever, they just aim to be consistent enough. And that's a big difference compared to most modern products, which are designed to remove variation completely. And once you notice that, you start seeing it everywhere. Products that look almost identical on the outside can be completely different on the inside. One is built around real ingredients. The other is built around maintaining a specific texture or flavor as efficiently as possible. And unless you compare them directly, it's easy to assume they're basically the same, but they're not. So what actually counts as real in a supermarket full of highly processed options? It's not about finding perfect food, because that doesn't really exist at scale. It's about finding products that are closer to their original form. Fewer ingredients, less interference, more transparency. And once you start looking for that, a few clear examples stand out. One of the easiest places to start is simple dairy. Basic yogurt, for example, often has one of the shortest ingredient lists you'll find. Just milk and cultures, no thickeners, no added flavor systems, nothing extra to control texture. It might not taste as intense as flavored versions, but that's kind of the point. It tastes like what it actually is. The same goes for certain types of cheese. Blocks that stick to traditional production methods tend to feel more natural compared to heavily processed alternatives. The texture is less uniform, the flavor slightly more complex, and overall it feels closer to real food. Another strong category is simple frozen vegetables. Not frozen meals, but actual vegetables. These are often picked and frozen quickly, without much added to them. No sauces, no stabilizers, just the ingredient itself. And in many cases, they hold their quality surprisingly well. They don't try to be anything else, and because of that, they avoid most of the issues that come with heavily processed products. Bread is a bit more mixed, but there are still better options if you look closely. Many standard supermarket breads are designed to last longer and stay soft, which usually means more additives. But some simpler loaves stand out. Shorter ingredient lists, fewer preservatives, slightly denser texture. They might not look as perfect, but that's often a good sign. It means the product hasn't been overly engineered. When it comes to snacks, the safest direction is anything that stays close to a single ingredient. Nuts are a good example, especially when they're just roasted and lightly salted. No complex flavor systems, no need for stabilizers, just the core ingredient. The same idea applies to simple oat-based products or plain rice cakes. They don't try to imitate something else. They just are what they are. Even in ready meals, where processing is almost unavoidable, there are still better options. Products that use fewer ingredients and simpler recipes tend to feel different. The sauce might not be perfectly smooth, the texture might vary slightly, but that's often a sign that the product hasn't been fully engineered to behave the same every time. So, the pattern becomes very clear. Real food in supermarkets isn't about labels or marketing claims, it's about simplicity. The fewer adjustments a product needs to look and taste the way it does, the more natural it tends to be. And once you understand that, shopping becomes a lot easier. You don't need to avoid everything processed. That's not realistic. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. If most of your choices lean towards simpler products, the overall difference adds up. Food starts to feel more satisfying, less artificial, and more consistent in a natural way. And once you start paying attention, you begin to notice patterns automatically. You stop relying on packaging and start focusing on what's actually inside. You recognize which categories are more processed, which ones have better options, and where the real trade-offs are. And that changes how you shop without making it complicated. What's interesting is how easy it is to overlook all of this, because everything in a supermarket is designed to look appealing, to feel fresh, high quality, and worth buying. But once you look a little deeper, the differences become obvious, and once you see them, you can't really unsee them. So next time you're in a supermarket, don't overthink it. Just look for simplicity. Look for products that don't try too hard to be something they're not, because those are usually the ones that feel closest to real food. If you've come across products that feel more natural or noticeably more processed, it'd be interesting to hear what stood out to you. And if you want more breakdowns like this, what's actually worth buying and what isn't, subscribe, because there's a lot more behind everyday super